مجددا يوم سعيد للسادة الحضور أصحاب المعالي والسعادة. محدثكم فيصل عباس مرة أخرى. هذه الجلسة ستكون باللغة الإنجليزية، فاسمحوا لي التحول بالتحدث بها. للراغبين في الترجمة هناك أجهزة الترجمة المخصصة لذلك على الأجهزة، وبإمكانكم التقليب بين القنوات بحسب اللغات التي تريدونها. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, I have the distinct pleasure to be on stage once again to continue discussing on the same theme that we started off earlier in the session before. It seems the overarching theme is the need for governments to be reimagined for the power of unity and innovation. And really, creativity in our minds usually is linked to, the Da Vinci's, the artists, the musicians, but really where we need creativity perhaps the most is in government. And as we were alluding in the previous sessions, it's important to also share these experiences and this creativity so that goodness can be shared. We've heard the introductions of our panelists, so for the sake of time and just to hope that there are no overlaps in the schedule, I would like us to get the maximum out of our experienced panelists. And I will ask again one opening question for opening remarks for each one of you. And let me start by a painful, perhaps, experience that we all went through in 2020, which was the pandemic. And I think it was, if there was any good that came out of that experience, is that it actually forced governments, it forced the world to act together and put all the differences aside, and put all the wars aside and forget about them and work together to finding a vaccine, distribution the vaccine, share knowledge. But that was a unique situation because perhaps our backs as humanity were against the wall. So without further ado, allow me to start with you, Mr. Blackman. Your opening remarks on governments reimagined and the need of collaboration between world governments.
Thank you very much. I think where we are in the world right now really presents the perfect canvas for, as you rightly said, the reimagination for governments. I start there because why? There are a number of challenges and opportunities that we confront as a global community. But I want to say there is no one government in the world that can create a solution for success for its people, and two, the global community at large. And therefore, that brings us to the point I want to make and really drive home. All governments must now see the global challenges as something that we have to now tackle together. And therefore, the reimagination domestically is going to force us to rethink our systems. How efficient are we in delivering our services to our people? But two, what collaborations, not just in the context of regional organizations or regional governance systems, but how do we now ensure that as across the landscape globally, that we can now work together in tackling these problems head on? So that reimagination is going to be key in really driving what I call governance for the future and governments for the future, if we're to now become fit for purpose as the world's regulators in terms of our people.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. Minister Uchral, can I ask you the same question, please? Obviously, you come from a different also part of the world, and we're trying to get as many perspectives here. Do you think the theme of governments, when we look at the world, we see a lot of wars and we see a lot of conflicts and we see a lot of difference. Do you see at some point, like what happened in the pandemic, but without having to, but by wanting to, governments coming together? And can you name any examples that you can think of where your country played a role, for example, or benefited from such cooperation?
A very good afternoon to all of you. Thanks for giving this opportunity to participate in the World Government Summit on the stage as a panelist in my second time. Last year, I was participated in the World Government Summit on a stage as a panelist. I have mentioned about our success of the digitalization of our government, and we have received the prestigious award, the World Excellence Award from the World Government Summit. When I compare to last year, when I was a digital minister of our government, we integrated almost 1,000 public service to the integrated one platform, and we used that platform during the pandemic time, and we saved the time, and we have been trying to approach the all public service to the people in less time. By the pandemic time, our integrated platform supported us to approach to the people of our public service. And since that time, 1 year ago, the number of the public service increased almost 1,200 service. But we thought, we consider that the productivity of the government, it's not only about technology, it's not only about some public service, it's all about the mindsets. That's why the World Government Summit, the supporting us to people realize that the importance of the public service if the public service very near the people. That's why since that time, as my new role of our government, the Chief Cabinet Secretary, I'm more focusing on the legal environment of the digitalization. And after when I appointed as the Minister of the Cabinet Affairs of the government, I'm working on the legal environment of the public service. We have, we're going to initiate almost 110 the legal amendment of the new different sectors law to the next parliamentary session. And if we gain our productivity of the government, the leadership is very important, and the global experience is very important to us. That's why when I participate in the World Government Summit, and we have gained our knowledge of some global perspectives. And in the next parliamentary session, we're going to discuss about almost 110 new legal amendments of those different sectors and how to approach to the people, the public service.
Fantastic. Mr. Orbán, last but not least, your opening remarks, please, about collaboration and the power of unity.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here. You mentioned the importance of creativity. I'm coming from a country which is in the middle of Europe, not the largest country, but if you talk about creativity, the number of Olympic medal winners and Nobel Prize winners per capita is among the highest in Hungary, so it's quite a competitive country. And I think it's important because in the last couple of years or couple decades, we realized that something significant is happening, and the previous paradigm about the description of the world order is not existing anymore. Those who were trying to convince us that after the Cold War there is a neoliberal world order based on unipolar moments, it's not there, it's disappeared, never been there probably. And there is a new era which is not about, as it was described by the neoliberals, not about how to demolish a government, how to destroy a government, how to privatize everything, how to make the government less effective because it is a problem from the market point of view, but the other way around. In the last couple of years, based on the pandemic experience and based on other crisis experiences, it became obvious that we need a state. We need a state which is effective, which is providing leadership, which is providing safety, law and order, sovereignty, on the field of energy, on the field of investment, on the field of infrastructure building, and so on and so on. And I think this is the takeaway what we got from the last couple years, that we need leadership, we need a government, a strong government, who is focusing on the practical needs of the people. Probably this is not surprising here what I'm saying, but in Europe nowadays it's surprising, and it's quite brave to say these things, because everybody is talking about some crazy radical ideologies, how we should transform all our way of life and create something which never existed before, and none of the governments are focusing on less regulation, more jobs, higher salaries, biggest GDP growth, and so on and so on. So especially in this uncertain era when we have a war in our neighborhood in Europe, I think this is the most important takeaway, to focus on the need of the everyday people, creating jobs, creating growth, creating less regulation, and creating a business-friendly environment which attracts everybody from all around the world. This is what we're trying to create as an environment in Hungary.
Thank you, Mr. Orbán. I'm glad you touched on Europe, and I know the theme since morning has been about hope and collaboration. But I also want us to be realistic. Is this easier said than done? Now, again, I don't want to go into geopolitics, but for example, the United Kingdom and Europe took 15 years to reach a definition of chocolate. 15 years of bureaucracy, paperwork, back and forth, letters, exchanges, long meetings. So, are we perhaps being dreamers or asking for the unachievable? Because naturally, different countries, even within a bloc such as the EU, might have different points of view or different interests. Is what we are aspiring to even achievable?
Well, so the debates in Europe in the last couple decades are about how to respond on the global challenges, because that's obvious that there are global challenges which affects every single country in Europe and actually every single country on Earth. But the question is whether to create a supranational entity and to transfer the sovereignty of the member states or the governments or the nation states, whatever we call it, to the supranational entity, does it make sense, or it's an illusion, or it's a dead-end street? And in Europe, and those who are pushing this kind of globalist, liberalist, federalist agenda in the last decades, they were promoting the idea, if you have a global challenge, let's find a joint answer. This is how they wanted to respond to the migration crisis. This is how they wanted to respond on the climate issue. This is how they wanted to respond on the Ukrainian-Russian war. And these supranational institutions, they were trying to take away the sovereignty and the power of the member states to solve the problems. But what happened, we just get deeper into the problems, and the situation became worse and worse. So it's like, I cannot say and I cannot confirm, based on the European experience, that supranational institutions taking over the member states' abilities to act are always good ones. In many times, you should have a democratically accountable government, or a system which is based on meritocracy and based on the cooperation between the average citizens and the leaders, and they can react, and they have the ability to react on the challenges, which are sometimes international ones. So this is what we see in Europe, and we hope that what happened in the United States of America, this new wind of change, will have an effect on Brussels bubbles as well.
Well, it's certainly having a lot of effect in a lot of places in the world. Minister Blackman, you wanted to interject.
Yeah,
I have a follow-up, but I would like to hear your interjection first.
No, thank you. On to that last point, I really want to touch on two key things. One, there has to be the continued thrust and support for multilateralism. Now, have there been challenges over the last decade or two as a result of multilateralism or globalization? In many respects, yes. But I think now is the time for us to reimagine what globalization looks like, what they now call reglobalization. Because why? The global challenges that we face today require all governments, not just some governments, all governments to now be working hand in hand to treat to these global challenges. You asked the question, is it achievable? Yes. We've seen in history when the biggest things and biggest obstacles and challenges that the world faced were overcome, it is when we had bold and strong visions that drove the delivery of these ambitions to be achieved. And therefore, I think what has to now happen, as my Prime Minister Moli, always says, is that governments must now excel in the delivery of the basics. And what does that mean? Getting back to the core functions of what we are elected to do in many respects, to treat to the services and needs of our people. And two, keeping our eye focused also on the current geopolitical realities, which continue to change in many ways. But if we, one, domestically do what we are elected to do for our people in the delivery of services and creating a better life for them, and being able to also navigate the challenges, for example, climate. We can't fight climate alone as one government. Certainly in the Caribbean, we have the view that the global community must now be hand in hand with the global north and the global south driving this agenda. And therefore, notwithstanding some of the challenges that has come to the fore, we must never relent and must never retreat from multilateralism. And two, we have an opportunity to reimagine what globalization looks like over the next 2 or 3 decades, where we have now to close the gap of technology, where those gaps exist, access to finance, particularly for countries who have great ambition, but historically are operating in a realm where the economic financial architecture of which they operate in was not created at the time when they were even member states. So therefore, we now must seize this moment, but we must never, ever retreat from the multilateral space. And two, we must now reimagine what globalization looks like and how it can benefit our people.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I want to finish on the first pillar of this discussion, which is fostering collaborative governance. And perhaps to you, Minister Uchral, Mongolia's third neighbor policy successfully balances relations with China and Russia and countries with very different political systems. Obviously, it's an art that not many countries are able to achieve. So what frameworks in contracts can protect vital infrastructure partnerships such as rail networks from geopolitical tensions? And then how do you balance the relationship, for example, with Western countries?
Mongolia is located in the Central Asia. We have 2 giant neighbors, as you guys know, and our foreign policy is more centralized. And always we respect 2 neighbors and third, fourth neighbors. And last year we organized our parliamentary election by our constitutional new reform. We expanded as a parliament 76 seats of parliament members to 126. We organized our parliamentary election by the mixed. The system is the 50 seats of parliament is from proportional, the 76 is from constituency. Those proportional the seats of parliament representing the different segmentation, different sectors. That's why we Mongolians located in the Central Asia, 2 giant neighbors, and that's why we keep our parliamentary authority since 1990, and on 1992 we amended our constitutional new law. We keep our parliamentary authority system. It's very, it's very good for the democracy. And after result of the new parliamentary election in last year, we created our new government. The ruling party invited the 2 political parties inside of the government, 3 parties inside of the government. Because 3 political parties inside and the coalition government. The coalition government submitted the 4-year strategic planning by the parliament. We included the 14 mega projects in our 4-year strategic planning. And for example, Since 1997, we have a cooperation with the third neighbors, the big companies. For example, the French Rana Group have been working in Mongolia in 1997. Within 28 years, we cannot start that project. After result of the election, our coalition government, we signed on the agreement with the French Rana Group by $1.6 billion for the uranium, the new project. And those third neighbors, the big projects, it's supporting us to how do we cooperate with the third, fourth neighbors. And that's why in next few years, we're going to work with the foreign investors. We're going to initiate our investment, the new law, and we're going to invite the third, fourth neighbors to the Mongolia. As you guys know, that the economy is related to the mining sector. That's why the economic diversification is very important to how to accelerate our development, and that's why we work with the French, some mining, the investor companies, and the Japanese companies, and some European companies very closely. And we Mongolians, it's very important. The policy is keep the third neighbors as policy, and those investments, it's they're supporting us to keep out of the foreign policy.
Thank you so much. I would like to turn to our second pillar of the discussion, which is streamlining public services. In other words, exploring the role of international cooperation in strengthening government service delivery, policy alignment, and institutional capacity building. Minister Blackman, could you please educate us, what is the Barbados Orange Economy Initiative?
Yeah, so right now the Orange Economy Initiative is really focusing on one of our core strengths as a country. Many countries have assets in terms of energy, in terms of landmass, in terms of natural physical wealth. Barbados, however, we have a surplus of creativity, and therefore the Orange Economy Initiative is really about ensuring that our ideas, our talent, or the way we walk, the way we talk, can now also not just be seen as entertainment, but now be the core for the future of the economy, what we now call the future of the knowledge-based economy. And secondly, being at the driver of creating global solutions to global challenges. Many of you in the room may or may not know, we were the first country that invented what is we all now have for breakfast called the grapefruit, the grafting of 2 citrus fruits. And now we have that all around the world. But the idea is that we now move from creating those things into using our culture, our history, in a way that can now translate into economic development for our people. Barbados is the country that first invented rum in 1703. So there's a long history of these assets being created, but how do we now marry these assets with our culture? And also exporting the ideology of Barbados. And what does that look like and what does it mean? We are a country that is very small in geographic size, but if you talk to the average Barbadian, their ambition is not limited and constrained by the geography of our nation. And therefore, the exportation of the ideology that culture and a global vision must be part and parcel of creating a new governance for what small states around the world must look like is therefore at the heart of that. So collaboration by countries amongst the Caribbean is corner to that. But also, how do we work with our partners in Asia and in Europe in reimagining, again, what our people around the world can do through their cultural heritage. Also, added to that, another key significant part of the Orange economy is the intellectual property side of things. Understanding the value in those assets that we have in our people is going to be key. And if we're talking about the delivery of the basics for our people, now we must move intellectual property, which rests and hovers within the realm of the private sector broadly and governments, but our people must now understand the value of their ideas. You may not be born out of a rich family. You may not be born into a country that has significant wealth in the earth, but you have the ability here to conceive anything that your mind can come to. But now moving that from idea to market, backed by intellectual property, is going to be the next wave of development. So certainly in Barbados and the Caribbean, and I stressed on the Caribbean because, as I said, there's a surplus of ideas and intellect in our region. And we're now starting to see not just the offshoots, but the manifestation in a very real sense as to what our people can do globally in that delivery.
Well, I speak for myself. I certainly did not know about the rum and the grapefruit.
Now you do.
So now I do. Thank you. We've established some things, but actually, it's a good point because when you are talking about soft power or you're talking about ideas, how do you actually quantify it, or how do you do KPIs or measures? How do you measure success in such a case? Because it's really not a physical product. As you said, it's not like you're exporting oil where I'm selling so many barrels of oil per year. So I'll be very interested about how you manage that process. How do you put targets and how do you quantify the idea economy, if you want to call it as such?
No, well, simply, you divide the country into the different sectors that you have, whether that be tourism, sport, health, etc. And when you look at your national development strategy and plan, you must really now measure every aspect of that in terms of what are the resources necessary, where they're going to come from, whether that be physical or financial, for example, intellectual. And therefore, every initiative that the government is now undertaking, you must now match that in terms of, one, the overarching, is it achieving the SDGs? One, tick or no, what are the options, how do we get there? And you drill down into ensuring that as you go forward, all the different sectors of the economy, sectors of the country, are now using the talent resources that you have. And therefore, the reimagination of the curriculum of the education system is going to be key. Because why? The global community is moving rapidly in terms of what is being required of that space. And if your domestic education system is not preparing your young people and your people at large for the response of where you can go in tapping into those opportunities, there's going to be a gap. And the idea economy, as it were, is going to be central to that. So every national budget really should have, as it were, and in Barbados, what we call the commitment for results, which allows you to see the big picture, but key deliverables in each aspect to measure and quantify what you're doing. And certainly that's what we've done in Barbados to be able to now map this out going forward.
Thank you for that. It certainly leaves us with food for thought, definitely. Mr. Orbán, I want to turn to you. Your digital ID system is known to have reduced bureaucratic delays by 30%, certainly ahead of many countries in the world on that front. I wonder how can cross-border data sharing agreements be structured by governments to guarantee citizens' privacy while improving service efficiency internally? And then, of course, again, back to the European question, perhaps many of your neighbors might have different laws or regulations. So even if you wanted to share that very successful, and I've been to your country and I've seen it firsthand, so I can vouch that it actually works and it works very well. But so data privacy internally, and then working with regulations with neighboring countries that might not agree with the way you do things.
Yeah, that's a very tricky question, and I cannot give you a very short answer how to solve it. The government has to look after it and create a structure, create an international cooperative system which keeps the data private, so preserves the sovereignty, but in the same time it's not a block or an obstacle towards modernization. For us in Hungary, this digital citizenship program is crucial because our entire foreign policy is based on connectivity. In the last years, many Western and European countries were talking about in line with this shifting world order thing, what I was describing, the block formation logic, the confrontation between the nations, and how the countries which are on the good side and the countries which are on the bad side, and how we have to be prepared for the confrontation between the blocks. This is something this is an idea which is highly rejected by Hungary and by the Hungarian people. We want to have a structure which is which is open for everyone, and it's based on connectivity. So, and I think the data proves that it's working. So the biggest investors are obviously the European countries, but the second biggest investors in Hungary are the Chinese, the third one are the Americans, the fourth one are the South Koreans, and so on and so on. So the entire world is there. The level of tourism is growing. Budapest is a beautiful city. It's well known all over the world. So more and more people want to come, discover, establish a business, an accommodation, and use Budapest as a hub for himself. So we have to be prepared, and the digital infrastructure has to be prepared to help the people to fulfill their goals. And this is where the economic growth for the upcoming decades will come from. I think this is the only way forward for every single country. If somebody is choosing the way of confrontation based on ideologies and based on hatreds towards other nations, then they will just disappear or at least decline economically.
No, I agree. And I have to say, I mentioned I visited your country, and I visited during the pandemic. And actually, I was very impressed about how well managed the lockdown was. And again, we've seen big countries. This is not an argument against, democracies, but, do we wear a mask? Do we not wear a mask? Do we lock down? Do we not lock down? And, what's worse than the actual problem is probably the hesitation. And I think something that is very clear from the from the digital ID system that you have and other things is that stability in government plays a major role.
May I get back to the other point which I made before, the importance of knowing what the people want.
Yes.
And this is why the Hungarian, I think, digital infrastructure system also important. It's about politics, but we have an instrument which is called national consultation. So what we're doing is that we keep asking people always about what they think on the field of economy, on the field of how to regulate the pandemic, what to think about migration, and how to deal with the economic challenges what we have, and we got direct reflection from those people. And if your measures and your ideas are based on that, then you have a legitimacy. And this is it's not about democracy and not democracy. All systems can be effective, but all systems, doesn't matter of the form, all systems has to based on the need of the people, and only those countries can be successful where the government is backed by the majority of the society. So this is why this digital infrastructure counts. This is the very effective way on communicating people, not collecting their data, not try to force on them something, but rather to be open and collect their honest information. And if you are building your policies based on those ideas, well, then you cannot be failed.
Well, and the proof is in the pudding. At least from my visit, I can see things running smoothly. So on that front, I wish you a continued success. I want to turn to the third pillar of this discussion, ladies and gentlemen, which is diplomacy for public sector excellence. We're going to explore the role of international cooperation in strengthening government service delivery and institutional capacity building. And I want to turn to His Excellency Uchral, and I want to ask a specific question. Landlocked nations are said to lose 1.5% of their GDP annually to trade delays. As such, diplomatic coalitions or partnerships become a necessity rather than a luxury. So what diplomatic coalition would you lead to overall the WTO's cross-border logistical standards?
No, our diplomatic policies, when we compare to other countries, it's totally different because our location is very different, and those two giant neighbors, and our export product is related to China, and some importing product is related from the Russia. And the Mongolia is a landlocked country, but we always consider that Mongolia is a landlocked country, but not mind-locked country. And that's why, how do we gain our productivity of the government? And the globalization is changing our lifestyle. That's why we have a different, one way is through technology to communicate with other countries. And that's why the Mongolian government more focusing on the digitalization. And we have the talented people who studied, who had good experience on the different sectors. And that's why we are inviting the skilled, the talented, the people from all over the world, and that if we accelerate our digitalization of the government, and we can communicate with other countries, and that's why it's very important and policy. And our economic is related to mining sector, and when I see that the few years after 1990. Our government created the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises, and our coalition government, how do we involve the private sectors, private institutions in the different sectors? And that's why we work with the foreign investors, and we work with the private institutions. We would like to invite in the decision-making of the government policies. And that it's all about the legal environment, it's all about the mindset, it's all about the change, the lifestyle. That's why in next parliamentary session we are planning to reduce the number of the state-owned enterprises by 2 times. And we're going to save the time of the people. That's why we're going to reduce the number of the public and civil servants by 30%. How do we merge those state-owned companies? How do we transfer the government duties to the private sectors, professional associations? And how do we work with the private institutions? It's very important. And the private sector, public sector, the duty is all support each other. That's why our coalition government working those the democratic, the reforms.
And is this similar to the is this the same as the smart government project you've been leading? And what is the role of global institutions that usually help with these things, such as the UNDP or the World Bank?
Yeah, we have been working with the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and any other the international banks for the smart government projects. But last years, we have been working with them for only technological side. The system is not only about change the lifestyle. We forgot about how do we change the people's mindset. It's not only about technological issues. The productivity, the efficiency of the government, it's not only about the cutting bureaucracy. It's the enabling innovation and agility of the government. It's not only about technological issues. It's not only about the system. We realized that. That's why it's all about some legal environmental the reform. It's not only systematical issues.
Well, I'm sure having a Department of Government Efficiency is very trendy these days. So it's wonderful to hear that it's not just about cutting, but also making sure things run efficiency. We're almost really out of time, and I want to, before I thank you, I want to leave you with. I want to ask you to leave the audience with a final thought. If you were to give, if there was a new nation to be created today in the world, and you were to give them one piece of advice about how to serve their people better, what would it be?
Thank you very much. I'd simply start by saying, one, we can't do it alone. Governments must collaborate with each other in the region and around the world. And two, efficiency must be at the bedrock of governance. Oftentimes there's too much red tape that hinders the growth that the people expect us to deliver for them. And once you can master that balance by resilience, I think we can really create something special.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Okay, as the Chief Cabinet Secretary, the Minister of the United Arab Emirates, as he mentioned that the brighter future doesn't demand the miracles. I agree with that quote, and we would like to work with the foreign countries very closely to share your good experiences in the future.
Mr. Orbán?
Probably don't try to save the people, but rather help them to save themselves.
Fantastic way to end this. It's amazing how time runs very quickly on these panels. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, for the exciting ideas you've shared with us. We wish you all the best in the great work that you are doing. The audience, thank you for listening in, and I wish you a pleasant afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.